Just to let you guys know before we get into the video, I am starting a new way of doing things. I don't know if I'm going to stick with this, but basically instead of scripting the content, I just made bullet points and I'm just going to try to talk about each one as I go along and see how that works out. Anyway, one of the more interesting discussions that I've seen on the internet, not really discussion, more of shit flinging contest, has definitely been that content creators are quote unquote ruining gaming. A big discussion that comes around this is that people are saying because content creators are so prominent, you've got a bunch of people who will, as soon as a game drops or as soon as a new season of something drops, they'll instantly be the highest rank the next day, or they'll get like a bunch of items that have to be grinded, 20, 30, 40 hours for, or something like that. One that sticks out in my head in particular was that a new Call of Duty season dropped like months ago or something like that, and one particular content creator in Call of Duty got like the highest camo skin you could possibly get within like 2 days or something like that. And people were like quote tweeting it and being like, "Oh my god, this is ruining gaming. I just cannot believe that this is such a big thing." And it's all bullshit and stupid because it's mostly said by people who don't realize that these kind of gamers who have strived to get everything as fast as possible have always been a thing. It's just that they weren't prominent or able to show how they've been a thing before content creation. But another reason people say content creators are ruining games is because content creators are very influential on the way that people view the different games that they play. And that brings us to the topic of today's discussion, which is the ability to 1v1 as a survivor. Now, this topic of discussion normally comes up whenever we're talking about the balancing of perks. Mostly in recent memory, we've been talking about something like the MFT. People saying, "Oh, MFT is not a big deal because we as survivors need the ability to be able to run as fast as fucking humanly possible." And you don't. You really fucking don't. But it's the thing about it is that the reason that so many survivors are saying this is because they believe in their heads that they, as a single solitary survivor, are supposed to have an exceedingly large fighting chance against the killer. And I've got a fucking newsflash for you. That's not how the game works. The dynamic of the game is that this is an asymmetrical game. The dynamic of the game is that the 4 survivors individually are a quarter weaker than the 1 killer, so that the 4 survivors' strength combined equals the power of the 1 killer. You're not supposed to be able to loop a killer for 3 gens or 4 gens or 5 gens or whatever. You're not supposed to have the ability to outrun the killer for an eternity, and you're definitely not supposed to be on that same power level. But I know why people think like this, and I want to make it clear before I get into this, I don't hate both of these creators. I have to say this every time, and every time somebody thinks that me talking about a creator or criticizing creator is me hating them. I don't hate them, okay? But people like A-Run and JRM are both not the sole reason. They are both part of the reason why people think like this. Because if you watch A-Run or you watch JRM or you watch high tier survivor players, a lot of them are really, really good at running killers for what feels like an infinite amount of time. And the reason that they're able to do this is, number one, they've had a lot of practice in this. And number two, they have a stupid in-depth understanding of how the game works, the layouts of maps or things like that. What's really interesting is if you watch these creators, whenever a map gets reworked or they get put on a new map or something, you will actually see them struggle a bit because they don't have the way the map layouts are supposed to spawn pretty much memorized. They have a little bit of more difficulty. But also, you'll also notice, and it's really hard to tell because they don't always show these games in their videos, but you'll also notice that A-Run and JRM and all them, they don't normally get to run the killer for a very long time. What normally happens is they'll have like a few games where they get to do that, and then they'll have a few games where they get kind of fucking steamrolled. And the reason for that is exactly what I was talking about earlier. a lot of people talk about win streaks, for example, right? People will be like, oh, well, this killer got 1,000 win streaks and you'll never hear of a survivor getting 1,000 escape streaks. And that's because the individual survivor is not supposed to be as good as the individual killer. Now, if you got a 4-man Swift together and somehow got 4 different human beings to coordinate playing with each other every single day for the months of time it would take to get to that 1,000 streak, then you would hear about survivors getting 1,000 3-man outs or better on the internet. You would definitely hear about that. You don't even need to communicate to achieve that kind of success. If every single individual survivor understands what they're doing, understands how to play the game and how to use the information that the game provides you, you will do a lot better in a lot of situations. But the problem is that a lot of people don't understand that. They think that this game needs voice chat and it needs a ping system and it needs all this kind of stuff because they believe that comms are just like this fundamental barrier that gets broken, right? Once the comms are there, then you'll just be escaping every other match. And that's simply not how it works. Because the reason is most of you are you don't have good decision making. You don't know how to play the game well. But that brings us back to people wanting perks that basically play the game for them. Now, I'm not going to say that something like, for example, Made for This plays the game for you. But what I will tell you is that Made for This makes it easier for you to play the game if you know what to look for, right? If you know how to look for the nearest window or the nearest pallet, Made for This has a lot of power. But this isn't a Made for This video. The point of this video is that whenever you're thinking about balanced discussions, particularly when it comes to the survivors and the abilities or the perks that they get, you need to think about the fact that there are 4 survivors in a match, and each of those survivors is supposed to be weaker than the individual killer. And that's a lot of the reasons why people get so upset with me whenever I say that Dead by Daylight is actually in a fairly balanced state right now. People get mad. They're like, no, you don't understand. It's killer-sided. It's killer-sided. It's not killer-sided. I don't think it's survivor-sided either before the killer mains start jumping in the fucking comments. It's neither-sided, and I've talked about this before. But because y'all keep thinking about the fact that you're supposed to be on you're supposed to be on an equal playing field to the killer, you begin to formulate this thing in your head where you start just obsessing over the fact that you get downed in 30 seconds. And most of the time, that's not just a skill issue. That's really how the game is supposed to go. Everybody's supposed to get hooked a couple of times throughout the match. You're not supposed to have matches where the killer can't hook anybody, but you're also not supposed to have matches where the killer just fucking walks all over everyone at 4 generators. Both of these instances are always going to be a trouble of skill issue on one side or the other, or the dog shit matchmaking. In closing, I think that it's incredibly important for people to just kind of remember the dynamic of the game you're playing. When you watch people like A-Run or JRM or I don't know any other good survivor mains. When you watch people who are really good at survivor play, you need to understand the thousands of hours they sank into true, actual practice. And not just playing the game. It's not enough to just play the game. You have to actually practice. Actually look at what you're doing, the decisions you're making, and how you can do and make them better. And then you'll start to understand how these guys got to where they are. But you also need to understand that these guys don't show everything in their YouTube videos. And when you watch their streams, you see them die a lot more often than you think you're going to see them die. It just happens that way. But you also need to understand that these guys are the exception. They are not the rule. They are not how the game is supposed to be played. So the next time you find yourself going up against a killer and you go down in 30 seconds or 20 seconds or whatever, understand that the game is built around that dynamic and stop trying to get the devs to release perks that are just going to make you impossible to catch, because it's not just you in the game. That's one of the biggest thing. It's a very selfish mindset. It is not just you. You are not the only survivor the killer is playing against. So stop trying to act like you are. Like I said in the beginning, guys, this was kind of off the cuff with bullet points, and I still got a little bit lost. I still rambled a bit, but I hope you guys enjoyed it nonetheless. And a special thank you to my channel members, The Cannibal Main, Alex Balix, Ryan Gesture, Tabasco Raccoon, Spirit Upgrades, and Nuclear Bomb for their additional support. If you want to find out how to get special thanks at the end of videos, as well as additional perks, please make sure that you click that join button down below. I love you guys so much, and I will see you tomorrow.